CBRE invests in technology and can help your company invest in their future. To learn more about how we can help service your real estate needs, please visit cbre.com.
Hello and welcome to today's Silicon Slopes Town Hall on returning to the office. I'm Blinksy CEO Mark Pittman and today's moderator, and I'm joined by three great panelists today on today's topic, returning to the office. I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly, talk a little about what company they represent, and we'll talk a little bit about the challenges they've had in dealing with COVID so far.
All right, well, my name is Deborah Turner, and I am corporate counsel with Avalon Healthcare. I have well over 15 years experience in employment and labor law on the employer side. So these last 9 months, I've spent my days working with more than just Avalon, but a number of other employers on how to get in compliance, but also just how to take care of their employees and keep business going during this.
Perfect. Arian, how about you?
Hi, I'm Arian Lewis, the CEO and co-founder of Kiln. Kiln is a flex office and co-working company. We're based here in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Lehigh, and soon to be in Park City. We also have a location in Boulder, Colorado. And we primarily serve early stage tech companies and teams of 0 to 50. I've been in the co-working industry for about 8 years. And so it's an interesting time to see how the use of office and the evolving role of the workplace is changing as a result of the pandemic.
Perfect. Kim.
Hi, I am Kim Whitman. I'm the Vice President of HR for Vivint Smart Home. And we have had a very interesting year along with everyone else with a very diverse workforce and so many different types of situations that we have to be attaining for our individual employees. It's been a challenge to not just get one set of standards, but making sure that it works for everybody while keeping them safe and connected.
Well, thank you all for joining me today. It's a very important topic that's not only timely for Utah and the Silicon Slopes environment, but of course across the world. The question is, returning to the office, when do we do it? How do we do it? What does it look like when we do it? So let's kind of dive into the specific challenges that each of our panelists is having in their work environment. Deborah, why don't you start us off and talk a little bit about the specific challenges you guys have at Avalon Health, the essential workers that you have, and how that's factored into COVID.
So at Avalon, our main focus is in skilled nursing. So we own a number of long-term care facilities and assisted living facilities throughout the Western United States. And so we are really at the forefront of everything that's going on right now with COVID. When you say essential workers, those are all of our nurses and our CNAs and all those individuals who are caring for really the most vulnerable population. And being in that industry right now, it's been really interesting to see all of the extra challenges that healthcare has, because of course we want to make sure that we're taking care of our residents, that we're keeping people safe. Unfortunately, COVID is a really, really tricky virus that sneaks in everywhere, and so unfortunately a lot of our facilities have had outbreaks. When you have individuals in that close of quarters and you have employees who do have to work so closely with those individuals, it's always a big risk. And I think the biggest challenge that Avalon has faced, besides just dealing with it, has been, of course, acquiring PPE. Very early on, it was a challenge for everybody to get it. And there are certain standards that in healthcare you have to have and have to make sure you're maintaining in terms of having N95s and doing the fit testing and all those kinds of things to keep people as safe as possible. And when that type of PPE is hard to get, things get really interesting. In fact, even now, 9 months into this, our corporate offices, which are just located in Salt Lake, they still look like a storage warehouse because we have to have certain amounts on hand. It's state regulated, in fact. And so we've been trying to coordinate all of that. But also, I think the other big challenge has just been dealing with the burnout. You have nurses who you need to have there for long periods of time, and they're working in a COVID unit. It's exhausting. And so, we've been trying to deal with that as well.
Perfect. Arian, let's jump to you. Tell us a little bit about the kind of unique situation you guys have. Kiln is a co-working office space. How do you allow people to get to the office? What kind of challenges has that presented to you and your business?
Yeah, great. So the first thing is when we first hit COVID, we're a flexible model. So a number of our companies were actually able to leave and go home and not continue to have to pay for office at that time. That was challenging for us as a business, but beneficial to those companies to be able to have that flexibility. But we quickly began to innovate on how we could create an office environment that was safe, that enabled collaboration, and that used technology to actually create the most COVID-conscious environment possible. So we found new HVAC purification technology. We actually have this incredible technology that sends positive ions and oxidizers into the space and actually can neutralize, or has shown to be able to neutralize a sneeze within 3 feet. We have infrared scanning technology that people can use to check their temperature. We innovated and created our own antimicrobial brass key system so that you could navigate the workplace without ever having to touch a common surface. And so COVID has required a lot of innovation, and we're fortunate that so far at Kiln, we haven't had one case of community spread. That being said, the real question is, how do we continue to enable good collaboration for the teams that work at Kiln? We have a lot of companies building products. Over 250 companies have a home base at Kiln. How do we actually create an environment where they can all work together, and where all of these companies have different cultures and kind of a few different views and attitudes on how COVID should or can affect their workforce? And so helping all of those companies kind of unite around a common set of practices has been something we've had to work toward. I think the final thing is, there was a lot of fanfare at the early start of COVID around work from home. And I think everybody had this sort of, let's band together, let's make this work attitude, which was the right attitude. But now that we're in sort of the 100-mile COVID marathon, and we're past maybe mile 50, it feels ultra marathon, I should say. It feels like now there's a real shift, and there's a burnout on work from home, and there's really a desire for people to come together and collaborate. And so now our challenge is just making sure we enable that at scale within a good set of rules that keeps everybody in a good situation. Tracing technologies like what Blyncsy has developed, really great. I hope you didn't give a full-on plug for yourself, by the way. This is an amazing company, everybody that's listening. You should go right now to the internet and Google them. But what I can tell you is, I think technology is the path forward. I think there are solutions out there, even if we had to live with COVID for a long time, which fortunately it looks like there's a good vaccine in the works, or several. But even if we had to, I think technology could enable a lot of progress for us. So
Perfect. Well, Kim, 11,000 employees at Vivint Smart Home, and that's a challenge in and of itself. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at Vivint Smart Home and how you guys are tackling that.
Yeah, so it's been a long road. As right at the beginning of it, you have all of this adrenaline where you're trying to solve these really large problems. And for us, it was first our frontline employees. So Vivint provides smart security as a service. And so it's not a do-it-yourself type of product. We send our technicians into customers' homes. And as you can imagine, in the beginning, there was so much unknown about how the virus spread, what we did need to do to keep both our customers and our employees safe. And so our first line of business was to make sure that we could keep those frontline employees safe, get the PPE that they needed, the protocols that they needed, set up customer protocols so that it wasn't just on our employees to make sure, but also the customers had a hand in that. So doing fit checks on both sides and asking the right questions to allow them to go into homes. We also had really large call centers where we had to mobilize all of them from an office setting to a work from home setting. And at that time actually didn't have devices one-to-one for every person, and so had to be very creative, and our IT team did an amazing job of very quickly coming up with a virtual desktop option to mobilize our entire call center workforce and be able to get them working very quickly from home. And that was something I think that showed a lot of innovation right from the beginning of this. And energized the company that we could make some really big changes. And then you think about the corporate setting. That was something that was a little bit easier because we could mobilize people to home, but the big issue that we faced there was connection and being able to do your work really well without having the support that you would normally have had. So we did a lot of check-ins with our employees. Actually, in the beginning, we did a weekly weather check-in to ask them what their weather forecast was and to provide feedback to us of what they needed. We provided training to our leaders. Just keeping that pulse and that tone on the employee base was really important. And last but not least, one of our another biggest initiatives, we were getting ready at the time this all hit to send out our direct-to-home sales force. So our direct-to-home sales force goes out all across the United States and Canada and goes again into customers' homes to customize our product offering for them, and again had to come up with great protocols and then navigate all of the different regulations across the United States that went down to a city and county level, and the changing that happened there was something that had to be monitored on a very consistent basis.
I think what's really interesting about Vivint is that you guys actually created the solution and then had a really great year, right? I mean, it's been a really good year for Vivint. And if you hadn't innovated as quickly as you did, it probably wouldn't have turned out that way, right? Or if you had kind of made a few strategic decisions that were different at the early onset. Is there anything that you could point to that actually you think was a turning point in being able to make sure you stayed ahead of the market?
Yeah, I think that just really taking both consideration of our employees and our customers into mind was really important to us, because we knew that in a time of unrest in our country, the demand for our product was most likely going to go up. In previous economic downturns, we have been able to weather the storm, and we see that that's a valuable service that, especially with all the social unrest and the things that had been happening in our country, the demand was going up both in our call center, our sales call centers, as well as in our direct-to-home channels. So again, thinking of what our customers needed and how we could provide that service to them was really important. But then that service piece. So again, mobilizing 3,000 employees to home from a call center perspective, and being able to have our technology still work. So I know we probably all experienced longer than normal wait times as we called in for different services in the things that we use most in our homes or just in general. And so making sure that that customer experience was there and that that everyone felt safe in the situation was the most important thing.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask is, each of you are dealing with a challenging environment, which to some extent you have employees interacting with each other, interacting in your spaces. How are you going about dealing with that, setting up guidelines, right? Governor Herbert announced on November 8th a set of new guidelines specifically around social distancing, mask mandates. How are you enforcing that in your office spaces? How are you communicating the importance to your employees? How are you dealing with that?
We have lots and lots of different companies at Kiln, and we allow each of those companies within their private office to set their own policy. But in the public areas, of course, we wear masks, and we also have a variety of other practices that we carry out as a business. I think one of the most interesting things has been to see how you can still get the productivity out of the office whilst also maintaining high standards of well-being and safety. And the truth is that while things can be annoying, there's still something irreplaceable about being together in person, standing at a whiteboard, developing a solution together. And so now companies are looking at their workplace strategy and they're saying, maybe 50% of our workforce is going to rotate in and out of the office. And maybe 50% of our workforce is going to actually be totally remote. And they're letting employees kind of feed back and say, you know what, I'm unhappy working from home. And as a result, you're getting some companies that may have in the past needed 100 workstations. Now they only need 50 because only part of their workforce is coming in on a regular basis. And so what we're finding is that Kiln is a place where people are experimenting with their new workplace strategy under a flexible model where they're not locking themselves into a long-term lease.
Kim, how about you?
Yeah, so it's very interesting in an HR role to hear all of the different perspectives from both our leaders and our employee base. And as we all know, not everybody agrees on the approach that we should be taking as individuals. But what we do agree on is that there should be standards that we can set as a company that can keep everybody safe. And so we spent a lot of time, again, creating a playbook, making sure leaders had the right tools to be able to talk with their teams. And one of the most important things that we covered in some of those trainings was the overall objectives that they were trying to achieve. In order for our sales teams to go out and sell, they had to be healthy. And so keeping that in mind of that intent that we're trying to, not that we're trying to control what they do or that we're trying to obstruct them in some way, but that we're actually just trying to keep them healthy and productive in the roles that they are in. The other thing I would say is the kind of peer accountability, because as you all know, is you can set up great guidelines and people are going to do what they will with those. And so just having the courage to, and the kind of permission to first have positive intent, to believe that people are trying to do the right thing. I know I've left my desk and gone to the restroom and gone, oh my gosh, I forgot my mask. And so there's moments that you mess up or you don't mean to do something. And so just that reminder or that encouragement for someone else of, hey, are you having a hard time? What can I help you with? And then all of our managers were encouraged to have one-on-one conversations with their groups to understand their situations, to understand their risk level, to understand some of the concerns that they had, and help them, because it was different. For some people, their concern was being at home and not having someone to reach out to or not feeling connected because they weren't getting the interaction that they needed to feel like they were thriving. And for some people, it was that they had people at home that they needed to keep safe that were part of a vulnerable population that they didn't feel comfortable in having any type of interaction in the office. So understanding that helped leaders make decisions for their teams.
Well, go ahead.
No, I think what she mentioned that I appreciate is, and you mentioned as well, it's about giving people tools and a framework and then helping them come to the conclusion that is most logical, which is how do we help each other be successful in what we have to do ahead of us. We just rolled out yesterday a partnership with MedCentral, a Utah-based medical testing company, to help our companies actually purchase and test their employees on a more regular basis. And I think that that's just another tool that companies can choose how they're going to use it. But I think as we give sort of employees or in my case it's Kiln members, access to tools or frameworks, they get to then adopt what they think is sensible for accomplishing the outcome that they need to for their business.
Well, I mean, we're dealing with a lot of challenges right across the board in a variety of different environments, but let's kind of take a step back and maybe dive into some of the more specific. So, Deborah, maybe I'll ask you a targeted question. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit from a liability perspective, right? We know that the state of Utah passed a bit of a liability protection shield, but we know there's federal considerations and others. Talk a little bit about, from an employer's perspective, what are the liability considerations to take into account here?
Well, for employers, there's a lot of it comes down to making sure that we're in compliance with that general duty clause that we have under OSHA, the Occupational Safety Health Act. And the general duty clause is such a vague thing where really what that standard is that employers have to make sure that they are providing their employees a workplace that's free from any known hazards. And COVID is considered to be a known hazard. So that means that employers, regardless of their industry, do have a duty to make sure that they're taking proper steps to ensure that they're keeping COVID out as best they can. And if it does come in, they're doing the right things to contain it, to keep people safe. And really, the standard that all employers should be continuing to follow are those guidelines set by the CDC. Because even with OSHA, which has an actual federal or even state equivalent laws, they're all looking to the CDC and what that current guidance is on what employers should be doing. So that involves making sure that, if we are in a workplace where people have to physically come in to work each day, are we ensuring there's social distancing? If not, are we providing the right PPE, whether that would be masks, whether that would be some other alternatives, because not everybody can wear a mask. So maybe we're looking at, accommodating someone who might struggle with having a mask on all day. Can we provide a face shield? Can we just make sure they're physically apart and we're doing some extra cleaning or something like that around that person? And then if there is a positive employee, that they're doing the right things in terms of contact tracing, who have they been, well, what's now within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more over, a cumulative period of 24 hours. So there's that extra challenge that the CDC has just posed to employers. Contact tracing, talking to those other employees who maybe had that close contact, quarantining, all of those different things. And, you're right, Mark, that Utah is one of many states that have passed a state law that said, for businesses, there is a certain level of immunity as long as they're not reckless or negligent. Now, that state law didn't really change much for employers because it didn't amend the workers' comp law. Mm-hmm. And generally, if an employee is subjected to illness at work, that's going to be a workers' comp issue. And there is some, protection and some, safeguards under workers' comp where, workers' comp's a no-fault law, meaning no matter why the employee got hurt, if they got hurt at work, workers' comp's their only avenue. So unless the employer was truly, truly negligent or reckless, a lot of it is going to fall under workers' comp for them. But the key is, again, making sure they're doing all the things they should do to keep those employees safe and responding the right way.
Well, so let me highlight a couple of things that Deborah mentioned, right? So making sure we're wearing masks, making sure there's social distancing, engaging in contact tracing, right? These are important things for employers to do to ensure, to effectively protect their business from liability, of course, also protect their workforce. Kim, 11,000 people. It's a daunting number, right? When you hear the things that Deborah's listing, how do you deal with that with an employee workforce the size of the ones that you have? How has that been for you, right? Reasonable accommodations. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so again, it's very targeted by the type of group that we're dealing with. So again, our frontline employees, we are very communicative about changes to any guidelines, best practices, learning from them. So again, our people that are going into customers' homes, if they do fit for duty checks every single day, if they see any type of change or don't feel well, we encourage them to not go into work and to share that information. So we're taking a lot of precautions. And then obviously if there is anything that does come up, then we take that very seriously and work quickly to make sure that we do the contact tracing. We are doing all of that manually at the moment. We are vetting out a few different technologies that can help assist us in that.
Blinksy.
They're one of them, for sure, yes. And so looking at, again, just that constant stream of communication and reminders, because it can feel commonplace once you start to get into a rhythm that you may, have a few moments of going back to what you're used to and not thinking about the situation. And then for our workforce that is in the office, it really is a matter of the managers, talking consistently about standards and then coaching when they see things that maybe shouldn't be happening. So for example, if you, as a leader, if I walk past a conference room that has 25 people in it and they're all close together, obviously I have an obligation to, say something about that and make sure that we do take the time to address it while it's happening and not wait till something happens. And luckily, we've had very few cases that come up. Most of the time, it's people that are getting it outside of work that haven't even been in the office, but we are tracing every one of our employees, regardless if they're in the office at the time, so we know kind of what the situation is, and that we're also giving them guidance on what to do regarding the office.
Well, Erin, you could probably give us a unique perspective here on density, right? So one of the questions here is how do you manage density in the space, right? You guys have a unique environment in which you do have specific restrictions that you're letting each of your sublessees, your kiln members kind of set and guide. But you've also got to look at the whole space cumulatively. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, Mark, once you move into kiln, you're going to fully understand this. So I'm very excited for Blinksy, and as they grow, we're going to see you come and spend more time at kiln, hopefully. But one of the things I want to mention is that it's really difficult for companies to understand the distancing or the density side of things right now. The governor's mandate that just came out actually says if you're more than 6 feet away, then a mask is not necessarily required. Depends on the environment. But if you're within 6 feet, you should be wearing a mask. And what's really interesting to me is the data that will come out saying what is the impact of density versus precautions. So the precautions that we're taking by wearing a mask, other technologies that we can employ in a space, how does that affect the way that density can work. So a classroom is a great example. My son just actually went back to high school, and they're full on now. They've got the full amount of kids in the classroom. I can't think of a more dense environment than a classroom. So I would assume there's going to be some good data that comes out of measuring the way that things work within a classroom.
I just would add one thing. I think one thing we've learned is the visual cues are really important. And so making sure that the building is set up in a way that reminds people. And so that could be desk placement. What we did, instead of moving desks and kind of breaking up areas, we actually just put signs on them or put something to block it off. But then those cues around the building and the signs that we have up are just good reminders for people on standards and making sure that we keep them safe.
Yeah, we've done similar things with stickers on the ground and kind of orchestrating flow through the workspace. But there are scenarios in which it's just harder to manage, and it'll just be interesting if we can get guidance and better information, how that influences the way that we look at things going forward. Like, for example, this event has no audience, really, except for you, of course, that are viewing it online. But I assume that in the future, we're going to have some better guidance for how these kind of events can occur in a way that's safe and responsible.
Well, Arian, you hit on something else earlier that I want to kind of go back to, right? So work from home has been a really large movement where it's been possible, right? I mean, you've implemented it. We've seen it across the country in a variety of ways. We never thought we would see it. For some environments, it's much more difficult, right? For Deborah's team at Avalon Health, when you're providing nursing services and supporting people physically, it's very difficult to do that from home. But for a lot of us, work from home has been available in some way. But there's something missing there, right? This human connection element, these sort of risk elements. We're also now hearing that from Salt Lake County Health Department that they've reached their capacity when it comes to contact tracing, right? That employers are now on their own to do this, so there may be more incentives to support work from home. But something's missing. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are you guys seeing in your teams? Burnout is one thing that may be a possibility. I'm sure there's challenges everywhere. Deborah, why don't you kick us off?
I think burnout right now is really the biggest thing because, at first, just to kind of repeat what you've already said, we kind of all entered into this, okay, we're going to work from home for just a couple months. It's going to be great.
Sprint, like a sprint.
Exactly. And now we're 9 months into it and we're kind of tired. So I think for a lot of employees, a lot of them, I think, are feeling a bit disconnected. And employers do need to continue to think about some more creative ways that they can connect. Because even though we're apart, technology is a beautiful thing, and there's so many different ways that we can connect. It can be anything from doing something fun on a Zoom call to even sending little care packages or things like that just let employees know that you're thinking of them. And I think that just goes a long way. Because I know one thing that I've heard, because I've worked with a number of different employers throughout this pandemic, is that most of them, when the idea of working from home first came up, most of them were really scared because they didn't know if they could do it. And, Kimberly, thinking about a call center, most call center environments, the idea of to go completely, work from home is a little scary because I think there's a little bit of a trust issue with some employees. But one thing I heard time and time again was that employees really stepped up and it went really, really well. But, again, even though it's gone really well, I think we've, kind of stepped back too much to really think about, okay, are we still doing well? Do we need to do something different just to check in? I think that's just the biggest thing still. It's just still doing different things to keep morale up, especially when we don't know when this is going to end.
Kim, let's jump to you. Same question.
Yeah, so again, at the beginning, there was so much effort that we put out. We spent a lot of time on calls with our teams, doing things that maybe we wouldn't normally be doing. Like we had people who created art and did some fun kind of get to know yous. We did an MTV Cribs style video shoot with people would take people through their houses and like give them the insight into them as an individual and their families. So there was a lot of effort put out in the beginning. And then we've seen as it has gone on that we've spent less time in some of those areas, or people got burnt out of even just being on calls, right? I am not used to sitting in front of a computer for 10 hours a day with back-to-back meetings. I miss the hustle of going from a meeting room to another meeting room, and that hallway interaction, and just the being able to visibly see people that you don't normally have in a meeting. And so creating those connection points are really important for our teams, but also just on a company level, making sure that employees understand what their resources are. So we have an employee assistance program that has been utilized at a much higher level than it ever has been historically, and that has a lot to do with the types of services that they offer. We offer mental health services, and they can do actual therapy sessions, or they could do articles, and there's a whole host of resources for them to be able to utilize. But I think one thing that we saw is people were also taking less time off. And so because they felt like, I'm just doing it at home and I can get so much more done, we found that people were working longer days, people were taking less time off. And so helping encourage our workforce to take care of themselves, take the time that they need to regroup. I heard an interesting analogy that you have to be able, we're constantly exhaling, and we have to inhale in order to continue to exhale, and sometimes we forget to do that when we're going so quickly. So just that encouragement of making sure that we take care of ourselves as individuals, and that we have the right support networks when things are more challenging.
Arian, let's jump to you. I know you've probably watched lots of different companies explore their strategies and how that's come together. What are your takeaways?
Well, so first, for most companies that we work with, 90% of their overheads are their people. So the majority of their capital is being invested into their workforce, and the productivity and well-being of that workforce is absolutely correlated with the outcomes of the business, probably similar to your business, and probably similar to your business, most companies, right? So the well-being and productivity of the employee is something that we're still working to understand better. There's a couple statistics that are kind of interesting. There was this study that was done years before COVID. This company in China, it was a Stanford professor that did the study. And they looked at how the impact of work from home. And during the first couple months, there was a spike in productivity, and then it kind of reached a steady state. After the first year, they asked the employees, how many of you would like to return to the office? And at least 50% of them said they want to return, even though they had, on average, a 45-minute commute. I think it really, the fundamental question is, why do we go to work? Why do we go to work? Why do we work? And part of it is the social fabric. Part of it is us being able to express our own personality and individuality into our work. And some of it is the function of what we're doing. And work from home can work very well for certain personalities, and for others it can be really confining. And the mental health pandemic is one that we're just seeing the early signs of. The fact that your employees are consuming more of those services really good. We've extended the same kind of options to our employees. But absolutely it takes more management time, and that requires more resource to be able to keep a workforce at home at the same levels of productivity as they may have seen in the early phases of COVID. The last thing is that right now the whole workplace strategy in general for most companies is in total flux. 73% of executives who have been surveyed by CBRE state that they are planning to explore flexible work options for the foreseeable future because they don't actually know exactly where things are going to land. There are some studies that predict that maybe 20% of the workforce will stay working from home, but that about 80% will actually return to some hybrid version of work from home, work from the workplace. Could be now that we're more comfortable, executives, leaders are more comfortable leading their teams virtually, but not 100% virtually.
Perfect. Well, so, we're starting to see the beginning of what looks like potentially an effective vaccine. We know we're still many months away, probably 5-6 more months away from that vaccine being made available, at least to medical workers and frontline workers, and thereafter to the broader public. Let's talk a little bit about what you guys are thinking about from your own perspective about how that will impact your workplace. Whether you require a vaccine in the office, whether you make distribution of a vaccine available to your employees. What are kind of your thoughts about how we tackle this, what you do for your teams? How are you thinking about this? Maybe Kim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think that ultimately we're going to look to the guidance from our government officials and the CDC, and looking to make sure that we're implementing best practices and giving availability to resources. So even the beginning of the pandemic, we looked into antibody testing, we looked into different options, what we could do to help our workforce gain access to the things that they needed. So for us, it will definitely come down to the laws and the direction that's given to us by the government officials, but more importantly, just that opening up access any way we can, as we've done with testing. So we actually just opened up testing in all of our facilities. We have an on-site clinic, a couple of on-site clinics here in Utah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and so just again, that availability to those resources are something that we want to be able to prioritize for our employees.
Arian, how about your perspective?
You know what? Because we are not a large employer, I would assume we're going to follow a similar path. I don't have a good answer for you on that, other than to say, I think that it's really an interesting legal quagmire, isn't it? To figure out, do we require everybody to take a vaccine? If somebody doesn't, do we tell them you have to work from home? Will some feel that that's discriminatory? I don't know how that's going to work out. I think it's a really good question.
Well, Deborah, maybe you can help us with that. I know you have a specific workforce challenge specifically that may make a clear answer for you.
Yeah, I think I can answer that from two different perspectives. I mean, to answer it from Avalon's perspective, again, we're in a really unique situation because right now, all of the state health departments have been tasked with coming up with a distribution plan. And each of those states have done that. And based on guidance that they received from the CDC and CMS, our employees, those employees who are working particularly in the long-term care facilities, they're likely going to be in that first batch. And so just a few weeks ago, for the very first time, we were able to start communicating to our employees that we are now working with CVS to bring mobile units to our different facilities to do the vaccines. And we don't know when. That's the big question. But we do know that when it does become available, most of our employees and our residents as well are going to likely be in those first groups of people. So, I mean, hearing that, I will tell you, was like, oh my gosh, it's so good to start to hear real things. The question is still when. Now, Avalon's in a unique situation, not only because we're likely going to be part of that first group, but also being in healthcare, and this is to kind of more directly answer, the legal questions of, can you require a vaccine? Being in healthcare, you're in a situation where you've got a very, very strong business justification for saying, yes, we can require certain vaccines. Now, of course, with that is always going to come the question of, okay, what if someone has a religious belief that contradicts getting vaccinated? Or they have a disability that does not enable them to. I mean, those are always going to be two areas, regardless of your industry, that you're going to have to take a pause and figure out, well, can we accommodate that? And for us, having employees who work one-on-one with extremely vulnerable people, there's not going to be much wiggle room. But it could be different for a different industry. Maybe you're working from home, maybe we're looking at some other alternatives. Now, to kind of look at it from a different direction, as of right now, the EEOC has not released any guidance when it comes to a COVID vaccine. And likely, as we get closer, I would say we're probably going to see something from the EEOC. That's who I'd really look to say, okay, how tough can employers get on saying, I want you, employee, to get vaccinated? But for right now, I would say the best guidance we have to go by is the EEOC's guidance on flu vaccinations. And with the flu vaccination, again, it comes down to, can employers require it? Probably. Are we going to have to take a pause if somebody says, I have a religious reason for saying no, I have a disability? Yes. That's, again, the standard I would say that we want to continue to kind of abide by. But I would again say here, probably I would say in the next couple of months, I would really expect the EEOC to have something more to say.
So, health experts have warned us we're going to be dealing with COVID into 2021, at least probably into 2022 at all reality. And in some ways, COVID may exist in some form in our society like a seasonal flu, right? The question is, do we reach herd immunity? Do we get enough immunizations? Are the vaccines effective? So it's really changing the dynamic for how we think of this as employers. And of course, it's just as people, right? How do we exist and organize in our space? I think most specifically, the thing we can urge you to do today is to encourage mask wearing, encourage social distancing, and of course, also support contact tracing in your workspaces and your offices to reduce the burden on government officials and reduce the spread of the virus in the short term. But let's talk a little bit about what happens going forward. COVID has changed the game for us, right? We've all woken up to the reality of what a virus, a pandemic can do to us. How do you guys think the world will change going forward? Will we be more prepared for the next pandemic if and when it arrives? Will our workspaces change in any configurable manner? What does that look like? Kim, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that workspaces for sure will have a long-term impact from this experience. I think none of us have grown up or none of us have been in a world where we've had such a heightened awareness of other individuals and the potential to gain sickness from them. And so I think that these are long-term implications. And again, we're getting into a rhythm now where we're more used to the masks, we're more used to social distancing. And so I think that will be something that does progress in some form. I don't know if it will stay the same that it has, where you have all of the materials across the office to route you a certain direction, and I don't know that those will stay, but I do think in considering how you set up the offices, that may be something that you do take into consideration. And then obviously as you talked about some of the filtration and some of the different ways that buildings
good technologies.
Yeah, those are definitely innovations that should continue to be discovered. And as I look at how the world is going to change for us, this year, nobody, I think, knew that we would be solving these types of problems. So again, like the example I gave of mobilizing our call centers to work from home, those types of innovations actually opened up a significant pipeline for us. That was the exact population of employees that was also getting hit pretty hard from an employment standpoint across the country. And so we were able to expand our ability to hire in different locations and actually opened up 23 states to work from home that we didn't previously had. So it helps create a more diverse workforce. It helps create faster fills in positions that may take a little bit longer and give you a better option to support customers.
Arian, what's your perspective? I mean, the nature of work is becoming more dynamic, of course, and you guys are at the forefront of it.
It does. I mean, so in my industry, flex office is about 3% of the total office market. All the analysts, JLL, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, they're predicting it will go to 30% of the office market. So it's going to grow significantly because the appeal to sign a long-term lease, dump a bunch of capital into FF&E and building out an office space right now is really not appealing, as well as try to figure out all of the things that you have to do to keep the office clean and safe for your employees. So for younger companies in particular, it's going to be, I'm optimistic about where our industry is heading. However, I actually think there's a lot of silver lining to the whole COVID pandemic thing. There obviously is a lot of tragedy, but on the flip side, we now have a world that is more capable of tailoring to individuals and allowing for flexibility. If we used it right, it could be a more inclusive world. It could be a cleaner and greener world. There's less commuting going on. We're spewing out less carbon into the atmosphere. It could be a world that's more connected to nature, where we actually really long to expend our free time out in the outdoors, in the out of doors, which I think is good for both us as humans as well as for the earth when we gain a closer connection to the earth. And then the last thing I'd just say is that where there's disruption, there's innovation. And this pandemic has caused a lot of really good innovation to come out. What you're doing at Blyncsy and what others across the tech industry and other creative industries, Vivint and healthcare, it really is actually hopeful that we as a human race can find solutions and we can innovate even against the most difficult of circumstances.
Deborah, what's your perspective? How are things going to change?
So one thing I think may change, and I think time will tell how prevalent this really is in the long run, is the onset of COVID, I think, has made a lot of businesses really start to think about adopting some type of communicable disease policies. And that was something, as I was working with other employers early on in this pandemic, they started, saying, okay, what should we do? Should we have a policy like this that covers not just COVID, but anything? It could be something as simple as having a little bit more structure in place if someone does come to work and they're sneezing and they're coughing, and we think, hey, they have a cold. Or maybe what if something major comes around again, just having certain things in place so that the employer is able to pivot and react a bit better. So I think that's one thing that's going to be a little bit more on everybody's mind, I think, going into the future. I think the other thing that I think we're going to see in the long run, I know we've talked about this so much, is the work from home type of situation I don't think is ever going to go away. Even leading up to this, it was becoming more and more common, but through this, I think employers have really been shown that it's an absolutely doable, viable thing. And all of us are always seeking some ways to be more flexible. And I say this as a working mom with 2 kids. Anything that makes my life more flexible is a beautiful thing, let me tell you. And sometimes working from home can do that. And so I think in the long run, we're really going to see hybrids where there's some time in the office, there's some time at home. I think even for those industries where working from home is not really quite as doable, because if you're in construction, you're in manufacturing, you're in healthcare, wherever, you got to go where the work is. I think there's still going to be a little bit more mindset of being flexible how they can. Because again, I think employees have really proven through this that when push comes to shove, they're going to produce and really, come through for you.
Well, our world is changing rapidly, right? And we're, of course, evolving and dealing with it every day. Here in the Silicon Slopes in particular, we're thriving in that ecosystem, innovating, finding new ways to deal with these challenges. One of those ways is Blinksy's new product, Mercury, which we all invite you to use. There's actually a discount code available to Silicon Slopes members. So you enter the code Silicon Slopes at checkout, and you can save 10% on the first 90 days of using Mercury to automate contact tracing in your office and reduce the spread of COVID-19. I'd like to thank all our panelists today for joining us in this great conversation, for helping us talk about this topic on returning to the office, and thank you to Silicon Slopes for sponsoring today's town hall. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Smith with CBRE. During these past few years, I've had the opportunity to work with many tech clients in the Silicon Slopes area, and it has been a privilege for me to work with them. CBRE is the largest commercial real estate firm on the globe, and we pride ourselves in having the most robust and flexible services and technology platform in the industry. We provide our clients with the tools and strategies they need to succeed in their real estate decisions. As Utah's economic landscape has evolved, CBRE has assisted numerous tech clients, from startup to funding and through unicorn status. We are a proven leader in the tech segment, and we look forward to the opportunity to put our skills to work for you. CBRE invests in technology and can help your company invest in their future. To learn more about how we can help service your real estate needs, please visit cbre.com.